There you go.
Here we start the new uncut podcast episode with Erik, but we will cut it later, but nobody cares. So I'm so excited to meet you. You just I have energy from you for the whole week. So for the whole week.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
When I'm edit and cut and so I think so fine. I just cut it and shared it when two of the clips in my Instagram, and people said, "Wow, that's fantastic that you such conversations." So
that's very kind.
Today I want to touch on the themes of Dan Martell book "Buy Back Your Time" that you quote. Yeah. So the first question is about the principle of buyback. What is the buyback principle, and why does Dan Martell say you should never hire to grow your business, but only to buy back your time?
Yeah, sure. So when he's talking about buy back your time, he makes it pretty clear, which is absolutely true, that people with money pay to get their time. In the beginning, we think of time is money, but that works inversely. You can spend money to buy back time. And I'll just say that in our family business, you can reach a place. I just listened to a podcast this week between Ali Abdaal and a guy's a billionaire. I can't remember his name right now. And he said, there ought to be a limit in our hearts about like how much money is enough money. And he said, what I can't get at work is time with my wife and kids. But what I'm working for ultimately ought to be that kind of thing, things that matter most. When Dan is saying buy back your time, the way to get more time, when you start a new business, everything, sales, marketing, development, leadership, overhead, all that's on you. And the goal would be to remove your name from almost all of those things so that you're just in leadership. And so you obviously need to outsource that to somebody else. And the rule that he gives on that is 25% price. So if I can find a person to do something I'm doing that costs 25% of my own hourly worth, if you will, or wage, then I should always do that. So if I make $100 an hour, as an example, just to keep the math easy, then if I can find somebody for $25 an hour to do that same job, I should readily invest in doing that. It's kind of the metric he gives. And the reason is you are the weakest link in almost everything. And there should be very few things in your business that require just you to do it. If that's not true, you've built the business wrong. And so you need to necessarily build it in a way that can scale by maximizing other people's gifts. So the best salespeople are so good at sales that they are necessarily deficient in other areas. They should not be developing, right? Those are the kind of people you want. When the interests of the business and your interests align and they are unusually gifted at a thing, there's always a quality dip. Seth Godin talks about this, where when you hand off a project, the quality does go down. You have to survive that dip, but ultimately you're hiring people who have the capacity to take it far beyond what you ever could. We just oftentimes, especially entrepreneurs, we can be control freaks and we have a fear of letting go. And so that gets into a whole nother series of questions about how do we hire the right people? What does that look like? But ultimately, that's why he's saying buy back your time, because if you are always doing everything, you can't do the 4% or as we've talked about, 64-4. Martell loves to say 95-5, whichever. You can't get your time back to focus on those things, which are actually how you're going to grow the business. So that's why he says buy back your time, because if I have 100% of time and 80% of it is spent on only earning me 20% of my income, I necessarily need to find people to do that 80% as fast as possible so that I can spend more time on the 20% because I'm getting a massive return. We broke that down by the math in our last phone call, I think. If you spend...
Yes, of course.
You remember what I'm saying? So if you're doing 20% making you 80, now you can find 40%, you'll make 160% profit, but actually it's 4% that makes me 64% of my profits, because 80-20 doubled is 64-4. So if I can just find 4% more time by hiring somebody else, and I can take that 4% and put it on and make it 8% of my time, now I've gone to 128% profit margin on top of what I was doing before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
That's very, very clear explanation. And I know a lot of people who don't understand it at all, who want to do everything because nobody can do it better than me.
That is the definition of purgatory. I hate that.
Purgatory, yeah. Purgatory. The hell of it.
That's a good...
It is. Yesterday was a boxing before yesterday, a boxing of Ukrainian boxer Alexander Usyk against some British boxer, and our boxer, sportsman, got the third champion title, so he is one of the best of the world now.
Nice.
And so he gave interview, but he doesn't speak English perfectly, so he wants to use the idiom of don't calm down, don't push ahead, don't hurry up. So he used an expression, don't push the horses. And so there is no idiom like this in English, so this is like a new idiom after his interview, and everybody reposts this. So he was, don't push the horses. Now it's all over the internet, this meme and all these crazy jokes about it. So my next question is about the time and energy audits. It's one thing that I remember from videos of Dan Martell is about management of your energy, not just time. So how can entrepreneurs use the time/energy audit to identify their time assassins? So what are some practical ways to implement this weekly?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important question, because there's a video by Alex Hormozy, you should definitely look up as a foundation for this kind of understanding, but here's the quick version. He was really helpful, and as a former recording artist and media company owner, I understand this intrinsically, but not everyone does. When you're doing creative style work, it tends to require time blocks of 3 to 4 hours. When you're doing management style time blocks, like you and I on a call, I just create time spots of 30-minute blocks or 40-minute blocks each day. And as long as I fill every spot, that day is considered valuable and productive. But in a creative economy, in a creative work, I need huge time blocks to do deep thinking and render an outcome that may not even be quantifiable in the moment, because it will be the net effect of multiple, moments. When I'm going to use music as an example, I might have an idea for a song and kind of get the melody worked out in 3 hours, but then I'm going to have to come back to that and fight with the lyric. And it may take me a month to write a song. I may do it in a shower. Like, you just never know. But creativity requires space and not urgency. Whereas management time, when I'm doing tasks and other things like that, I literally can who cares how I feel? I don't need to be in a zone for it. I just need to do work and check things off. So that's the first thing. Understanding first, when it comes to your value, that 5% of things that you can do well, that 80-20, right? The 20%, that's where you add the most value to the business. What type of work is that? Is that management style as such, or is that creative style? And then approaching it that way. For me and my business, to give you an example, the most important part of my day is the morning. My energies and creativities are the highest, and I believe overwhelmingly in the old kind of phrase, put first things first. That's why they're first. They're the first priority, so I do them first in the morning. I brush my teeth, the first thing I do after I make the coffee is sit in a chair and read and work on me. I'm learning, I'm spending time in prayer, working on who I am as a person, making sure that person is prepared to go out and battle for the day. Then the next thing I do is I wrestle with my body and I exercise, because I know if I don't do it first thing in the morning, I will not stop working throughout the day. I just get too focused. So I do, and I know that if I don't do that, I don't live long and I don't have a healthy life and the quality of life diminishes. So I do them first. And then the next thing beyond taking care of my inner person and then my actual body is I do the work that's most important that day. Now, I can't reserve that time 5 days in a row based on my life, but 3 out of every 5 days, I don't do anything till noon but work on the most important thing in my business. A lot of times that's creating content. It may be some calls I need to make, whatever that is. Sometimes that changes. But then I just prioritize those things in response to, if I only got one thing done today, and that needs to be about my very finite window of what's going to move this business forward, what is that? And I need to have an honest conversation with myself about what that looks like. And then I just time block those energies. So coaching calls for me, it's very low energy. It takes a lot of general energy, but I'm tapping into resources I already have. I'm not having to create something new. So I would much prefer to do this at the end of the day when I've already done my deep thinking and the work that's actually hard to me to do. I love meeting with you. You provide energy, so we get through it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's very
prioritize your time, figure out where the value opportunities are, align it with where you add the most value to your own business, and then categorize it based on whether or not that's creative time versus administrative time. I highly recommend administrative time is toward the end of the day. I don't know many creators unless you happen to be a true night personality, like a night owl type of person, most everyone I know in the business space would much rather have their mornings to themselves, to focus on that work and then transition at lunch into other things.
Perfectly aligns with the book of Cal Newport, Deep Work, that
Yeah.
he explains exactly how people
Yep.
achieve real results only when they put long hours, like before noon. So Stephen King does like that with writing his books, 2,000 words before noon. It's like that.
Yeah. And the other thing is don't judge the work when you're doing it. I couldn't, let me show you these books right here. For anybody who's wanting to look into this more, we have The Art of War and Turning Pro, both by Stephen Pressfield. Unbelievable 1-2 punch. And these almost focus as like a, from my faith tradition, we would call it like a devotional, but it's almost like a business devotional where he's like, it's such micro readings of just like 1 page each that prepare your mind to do battle with the creative work of building a business, of becoming the person you want to be. So highly recommend that.
You wouldn't believe it, but we had a podcast episode right on this book this week.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's go.
with the member of Accelerator, with Boris from Portugal.
Yeah.
And we discussed exactly this book by Stephen Pressfield.
It's
and also,
so good.
I have this book. I read it several times, and also I had another book of his, like Meditations of a Creator for 365 days, 1 page per day for the whole year. So similar.
Awesome.
Yeah, so similar to our Stoicism book by Ryan Holiday, but it's similar to what Stephen Pressfield wrote.
It's so good.
Yeah, so we align with this, align on the reverence of this book together.
Yeah, yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to mention is that the pain line. So what is the pain line in business, and how do most founders get stuck there? Can you share a moment when you personally hit your pain line? So I don't actually understand what exactly does this mean.
Sure. You said pain line?
Yeah, pain line.
Yeah, I mean, I can infer what you mean by that. Like, you know, we teach our kids that almost anything worth having is on the other side of some sort of pain you don't really want to go through, you know, and that you just think of going to the gym. You're intentionally entering into an environment where you're going to do heavy things, like run where you don't want to run, lift stuff that's too heavy until your muscles necessarily fail. But it's in the failing, in the breaking of the tissues, in the causing micro tears in your muscles that they actually build and become stronger. And if you want to become a person who's more fit, necessarily have to enter into a fight, into a struggle. And I think with regard to, but have you ever heard somebody say after they've worked out, like, oh, I'm so sore today, but it's a good sore? Do you know what I mean? Like, versus a bad sore? And I think when it comes to business, we need to be real honest with ourselves about what it takes to be successful, and see the soreness and the reps and the sweat and all of that as a feature and not a bug. When I started my music career, I learned very quickly it was not going to be about the quality of the music. It was going to be about whether or not I could find a place to pay me to play. I meet a lot of musicians whose music is so good it's useless because they can't find a place that will pay them to play. And so they are in love with their tool. They're like, I'm really good at it, and they are. But if you can't find somebody who's willing to pay for it, it's just going to be a hobby, right? That's the definition of a hobby. So the real work of being a successful musician is either becoming a booking agent for yourself or finding somebody else who has a vision for your business that they will book for you and you pay them a percentage. That is exactly business. In the beginning, I find most of the pain comes with trying to get out of gravity into orbit. Once you're in orbit, it's cruise, right? You're just chilling. But it takes so much effort and so much energy to just break the pull of the gravity that wants to keep you grounded. I believe there's a necessary evil that opposes good. And this is my faith tradition. Like, I believe that there is an enemy to every good thing, and that enemy is only here to steal and kill and destroy good things. And so if we're in business providing real service, helping real people solve real problems, I believe that there is a gravitational force that wants to keep that from happening by pulling you down. And so by waking up every day, and that's why I say I work on myself first, to say, like, who am I? What am I anchored in? My faith, my family, etc. And then the other thing about getting past that pain point is I believe that it takes a necessary reward, a desired outcome that is greater than the pain I know I will encounter. In sports, we might say that's a trophy at the end of the season. Maybe it's a picture of weight loss of me in a different swimsuit, like looking, I know you're a very fit individual, so like not all of us are there yet, but there needs to be some sort of reward, some sort of vision board that shows you the future version of yourself, again, holding that trophy or whatever, that makes it possible for you to overcome that. In my faith tradition, again, a Christian person, there's this scripture that says it was because of the joy set before him that Jesus was able to endure the cross, to look down on the shame people would place on him and to finish the job. We teach that in our family all the time. If you want to overcome anything difficult, you have to have clarity on what you want. Because when you're face down in the mud, when you're having to make another 100 phone calls, when you're hearing people say no, you need to have a place to go to internally that says, no, this is worth it, because I want that more than I'm afraid to suffer. More than the pain I'm feeling right now, there's something on the other side of this pain that's worth it for me to have. Denying myself, suffering through this is not, then it reframes suffering as investing. It's not a sacrifice, it's an investment. And Viktor Frankl, I know we mentioned him before, but he says, a person can overcome almost any how with the right why, or overcome any what with the right why. And so we need to know why we're doing this. What are we suffering for? Because if not, that pain point can spiral into hopelessness, where it's just, we just want out, as opposed to redeeming it with meaning, which is what Frankl is about, towards our preferred future. Because here's the thing, the pain's going to come. It doesn't matter what you do. Any business will necessarily have something trying to stop it. Most of all, my inner weakness, which is why I got to get that right in the morning. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. So I cannot do anything without going to the gym in the morning, without my 3 hours of learning or working on some deep work before going to the gym at 9 o'clock. So I wake up at 5, and then I work for about 4 hours doing some light exercises, meditating, reading, and writing, and working on my podcast. Then on 9 o'clock exactly, I go to the gym, which is near my house, and then I work for 1 hour, and then I start my day.
Let's go.
It's like a religious principle for me, and I
Absolutely.
want to tell about your why, and I enjoy doing the hard work. I enjoyed doing this and running, so I cannot even understand what the pain is, because I like doing this.
And I what's funny is I don't think people start there. I think the early reps are always hard, but the people that I know are successful fall in love with the process, not just the outcome. So you're a perfect example of what I'm talking about in the fitness space. Like, you love it. Nobody has to ask me to get up in the morning to go read and exercise. I love it. That's exactly right. But you have to get there over time. In the beginning, it's just hard to get out of bed.
So also about the search for a meaning, after starting with your why, there is a book by Simon Sinek, which is very popular in corporate world.
Correct.
I also bought several of his books on Amazon Audible. And so his principle is to always start with your why. Why are you doing this? What is your personality? What is your identity? What is your mission? Why are you doing this in the first place? And there are different leaders. There are people who are people of what, or people of how, and people of why. So the leaders, usually the high leaders, are people of why, because they understand the on-the-ground principle behind every process, not just how to do this.
Yeah.
So my next question is about the buyback loop. Can you break down the buyback loop? It's audit, transfer, fill. Which part do entrepreneurs typically struggle with most?
Audit means let's take a census of how I'm spending my time right now. I'll use, since you're asking about a Dan Martell product, I'll use his words. 80-20. Again, he's applying 80-20 twice. And instead of saying 64-4, he's saying 95-5. He believes 5% of your effort creates 95% of your profit. It's close enough to true. Let's go with it. His point is, let's take an audit of what I'm doing, because if 95-5 is true, that means 95% of what I'm doing on this hand, I shouldn't hold it 5. 95% of what I'm doing on this hand is not necessarily the 5. Like, that's got to be true. Because remember, this is infinite. So at any stage, it's true. Let's use 80-20. I can't do 95-5 ethically. 80-20 is the mathematical equation. 80-20 is infinite. So at every stage, no matter where I'm refined in the stage, it is necessarily true that 20% of what I'm doing is yielding me 80% of my profits. but 80% of my time is only making me 20% of my products. So in the audit stage, you're having an honest conversation with yourself, mapping everything you do and being, again, this is ruthlessly honest about, okay, what do I actually do that brings in cash flow? Or what do I actually do that moves my business forward that no one else can do? That is a very limited subset of things. And if you can't be honest with yourself, bring somebody else in to help ask you those questions. That's why consultants and coaches are so helpful. In the
Like
beginning,
this one.
inside of $100,000, if it's not creating cash flow and you can't tie it one-to-one to how it's bringing in money, don't do it. That's the answer there. But after you do the audit, then you move to transfer, which is you're finding somebody whose skill, whose primary desire and skill set aligns with the thing you need. You're not talking about finding a warm body. Like, I don't just need a human. If I'm looking to take care of my accounting, for instance, I didn't find just anybody who knew how to work to QuickBooks. I found an accountant whose favorite thing is keeping track of numbers and reporting to me how it's working in my business, in my nonprofit, in my whatever. So acquire a person who has a joy for it, but then also has the capacity to take it far beyond what you ever envision or want for that stage. And then you transfer it to them, which now, let's pick a number. So finances is a good thing for me. I love money and I love finances, but I did my own QuickBooks for years, like 15 years, but I just got to the place where I could not justify taking the time to do the bookkeeping and the auditing that needed to happen regularly. So again, Martel's framework there is if you can find somebody and pay them 25% of your time cost to do it, you outsource it. But now for me, that took at least 20% of my time, a day a week, or maybe 2 days a month. And it took it off of my plate. Well, now I have 2 whole days in a month. I can double down on the 20% that's making me the most money. And so that's where the fill comes in. You're replacing any time you export it to somebody else back to the thing that only you can do that drives the business forward as a part of your 20%. And you just keep iterating it. And what happens, just mathematically, what should happen if you can outsource 20% of your current workload and reapply that 20% to your maximizing 20%, now we're looking at 40, 60, which means your income went from 80% of what it was, you've added another 80% of income. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Life-changing.